Welcome to the Reality Therapy Podcast, where the truth will set you free.
Welcome to the Reality Therapy Podcast. I'm joined today by my friend from the conference, licensed professional counselor, Mickey Heller. So grateful for you to be here. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Ryan. I'm absolutely elated to be here. It's an honor.
We already got a little bit of mutual podcast experience with our panel discussion.
Yes,
that was a lot of
so
fun.
So fun. And of course, great to see everybody again.
Yeah, it was like our little mini reunion. Yeah,
it was, for sure. We need more. So, we need lots more.
I would love that. I would love that.
Yeah.
So tell me who you are, where you come from.
Okay. Obviously, I'm Mickey Heller, licensed professional counselor. I'm licensed in the state of Texas. And I reside in a town called Anna, which is about 30 minutes north of downtown Dallas, I guess, kind of like a burb of Dallas, if you will. I've been here for over 25 something years, originally from Houston, just kind of came here and started our life in Dallas. It's just been one of our favorite places, and we're just much happier here. And I've been a therapist since I guess I finished grad school in 2017, in December of 2017, and I've been practicing ever since. But it's been quite a journey finding, kind of your niche and
what inspired you to become a therapist?
Good question. So a lot of people I find go into the clinical world because they have family members or friends that have often struggled, or themselves struggle with some type of mental health issue. That wasn't the case for me at the time. I knew that I always wanted to be in a helping field, and I was actually going to be a veterinarian. And I love animals of all species, and I really wanted to work as a veterinarian. And I started working as a registered vet tech. And long story short, I ended up hurting my back pretty bad, lifting an animal the wrong way. And the A&M vet school decided that I was a liability at that point. And so I had to reinvent the wheel with my life and figure out, okay, where am I going from here? Because I always wanted to be a vet. And
who's easier to deal with, people or animals?
Oh, bro. I guess the logical answer would be animals, because they can't talk, right? So you got to kind of do a lot of exploration, but you still have to do a lot of exploration with people too, right? Because some people don't talk, they don't use their words. But yeah, definitely I would say animals. But anyway, after I had to figure out what I was going to do with my life after that, I just kind of started. I knew I didn't want to be like a nurse or like anything like that, because I don't do bodily fluids. But my mom was a nurse, and I had mad love and mad respect for her. And so I went to my mom and I was like, Mom, can you help me figure out some things here, some other options? And I was like, I knew I didn't want to do X. I knew I didn't want to do this. I knew I didn't want to do all these things. And she said, what about respiratory therapy? And stick with me, there's a moral to the story. She's like, what about respiratory therapy? And I was like, let me research that and see what that looks like, right? And so I started doing some research on what's required of a respiratory therapist and what they do and all the things like that. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? I could probably do this. Yeah, you got to deal with a little bit of blood, like arterial pokes and things like that, and the trachs. But I was like, I think I can manage that. And so my mom had a friend that was a respiratory therapist, and I shadowed her for a little bit as best as I could, or I was allowed to. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. So I applied for the program at Collin College, which is a local community college here in Dallas, and to the respiratory therapy program, and I got accepted. And so I was about a semester and a half into the program, and it was required to take an intro to psychology course. Okay. It was required. You had to do it. And I was like, okay, cool. Never in my life had I ever thought about being a therapist. ever, or a clinician in any shape of the imagination. And I'm sitting in this class, and huge shout out to Professor Matt Diggs. He is a huge mentor of mine all through my college career. And he was teaching this intro to psychology course. And this is what I tell literally everybody, Ryan. The only way that I can explain what it felt like was, if you've ever watched like those old school cartoons where the heavens kind of opened, and then like this beam of light comes shining down, and you hear the angels, "Ah," you hear the angels in the background. I kind of experienced that, metaphorically speaking, obviously. I kind of experienced that in this day, and oddly enough, we were talking about Freud. We were discussing Sigmund Freud that particular day, and I was like, you know what, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. It was just like, it was a godsend, in my opinion. I think that was God's way of just kind of kissing me on the cheek and going, hey, this is the path that I've made for you. I need you to get on it, right? And so that same day, I went and changed my major to a psych major, and
Wow,
here
same
I am.
day.
Yeah, same exact day. Right after
Wow,
that class, I was just like, I mean, that's how powerful it was for me. Like, I knew this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And
that's
it's
cool.
still, yeah, it's still in the helping field. I'm still helping people, not animals, but people. I'm still, doing everything that, ultimately I wanted to be doing, was helping, and changed my major, and here I am.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So, next thing I want to talk about is, I guess we can talk about undergrad, but really like grad school. So you were
Yeah.
going for, I guess, master's in clinical mental health counseling to get an LPC. Is that right?
No, actually,
Okay.
all of my degrees are in applied clinical psychology.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So originally, my goal was to be a psychologist. I wanted to
Mm.
be a psychologist. And so I got into the psych program, undergraduate psychology program, master's level psychology program. And by the time I graduated, I was qualified as an no, an LPA, licensed psychologist associate.
Ooh, okay.
Okay. So basically, I'm what you would call a master's level psychologist, but I think in the real world, we just call them psychotherapists.
Mm.
So, I was going through grad school. I was in the psychology program. Now, I think there was 3 extra classes that I had to take to be able to be qualified to do the LPC. My goal was to do the LPC, work as an LPC while working on my doctorate. Because I still wanted to work, but that was my goal. Just, I'm going to do the LPC, work as a therapist while I'm in, the doctorate program. As I was doing this, though, I realized that this is, what I wanted to do throughout grad school. In graduate school, in the psych program, it was very focused on assessments. I've done every assessment you can think of, and when I worked in the clinic at the school, and we had our clients, or we called them patients, we had our patients coming in, that's what I did, ADHD assessments, you
Mm.
name it. And I hated that. I wanted to sit down with these people. Like, I wanted to talk to them and get to know them and get to the bottom of what was going on. And that's when I realized that, I was not going to go in and do clinical assessments. Like, I wanted to do therapy. And so I got my LPC and got into working as a therapist. And I said, I don't need that doctorate. I
Mm.
just don't need it. And,
Yeah.
okay, so I can save face. Call me Dr. Heller. I don't care. But, no disrespect to the doctors out there, but I didn't need it to do what I was wanting to do. And that was to be a therapist and sit down with my clients and help them.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I feel like, I know some like PsyDs or clinical psychologists that
Hmm.
do some really good work, but
Hmm.
to me it feels like, at least what you're studying feels like what you're talking about, that very sanitized like assessment, and I feel like that's where a lot of the money's to be made, in those assessments, rather than
Hmm.
actually that human connection of therapy.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, yeah, sure, I could definitely make more money doing the assessments and having those letters behind my name, for sure. But let's be honest, do any of us go into this field for the money? No. But yeah, I just didn't need it. And I didn't, I was going to actually do the PsyD because I didn't
Mm,
want to be academia.
yeah.
PhD is more research focused and academia. That wasn't my vibe. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go the PsyD route because that's more focused on, therapy and things like that. And I didn't have to focus on the research side of things. But yeah, I opted out and I couldn't be happier.
So, when you talk about both your undergrad and your grad school, one of the things I talk about a lot is I had a classmate who described my program as fluff and wokeness.
Oh,
you know and I talked to so many people who talk about how A, there was a huge political bias in their program,
yeah.
and B, they didn't feel like they had good preparation for actually being a therapist. What did you
Right.
feel like? Did you feel like your program prepared you? Did you notice a bias?
I, thank God, no. On the bias part, I think I had just finished school right before the chaos started. In
Mm,
2017, COVID hit, and 2020, I believe.
2020.
And I had great professors that taught the material without all the gibberish and nonsense. So I think I'm one of the lucky few that had a pretty great experience in grad school. Now, as far as preparation goes, again, having some great mentors, I think they did prep me pretty well. I think the only problem that I see, and I think this is still kind of a big issue going on today as I talk to like interns and associates and stuff, is what to expect financially, right? What does it look like to be a business manager? Because if you're going to go into your own private practice, what does that look like? What does that entail, right? There's no preparation, at least there wasn't in my day, on, what do your future goals look like as far as being a clinician? Are you going to want to go into private practice? If so, you need to know how to do taxes. You need to know how to, do all those things, be an admin, to do your own administrative work. It's not all just sitting in front of the camera or sitting in front of your client face to face. There's lots of other things involved, with owning a business, right? And they don't teach you any of that. At least they didn't back in my day. So I think that was my biggest struggle coming out of school and getting to the point to where I knew I wanted to open my own private practice, but I had to find mentors along the way to kind of help me with that.
Hmm. That's good. So, I don't remember if you've covered this or not, but do you have like a area of specialty that you focus on as a therapist?
I do. So my favorite population is working with young adults,
Mm,
primarily like college kids. I have quite a
mm,
few clients that are in college currently. I just really love the young adult because they're so confused. I'm an adult now. I can make my own decisions. Oh shit, I made a
Can
bad
you?
decision.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, it's like I'm dropping a lot of bombs on them, but I'm also helping them see a lot of logic and reality into life and what it truly means to be an adult and dealing with adulting things.
Mm,
As far as I work a lot with the kind of axis 1 disorders, if you will, like general anxiety disorder. I also have a certification in treating anxiety. It's definitely my specialty area is treating anxiety. So your axis 1 disorders, generalized anxiety disorder, social anxieties, ADHD, panic disorders, and of course mood disorders such as depression. Um, I'm a behaviorist at heart.
mm.
Okay. And that is one thing I did catch a little bit of flack from when I was in graduate school, especially from the more psychodynamic people.
This is a
Uh,
big feud.
yeah. But I am 100% a behavioralist at heart,
Are you a
and
CBT person?
100%. Yep. Not 100%. That is my primary modality because I truly believe, when I'm observing people and their behaviors, it's going to start with something going on up here, right? And yes, an event can take place in one's life, right? And whether it's a death in the family or, something tragic, trauma can happen in one's life. But at the end of the day, that experience is still going to trigger thoughts, right? And these thoughts are going to lead to a feeling, right? And these feelings are going to lead to a behavior, right? And so we got to get to the bottom of, we got to get to the thinking, so that if we're thinking properly, we're now feeling better and behaving better. But I also really love to incorporate mindfulness practice as well. I love mindfulness. Mindfulness, really helps with building awareness of oneself and navigating life and being present in the moment. And with anxiety, anxiety puts you in the future where you have no control over the future, to where depression wants to put you in the past. Both of these areas you don't have control over. You only have control over the here and now, this very moment, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and what you're doing, right? And so that stems a lot from why I use the cognitive behavioral therapy modality, and really focusing on what's going on up here. But I also love to get with my anxiety clients, we got to get you calm first, because if we can't get you calm and breathing and all the things, then we're not going to get control of what's going on up here, because you're too busy going, what if, So yeah.
I love CBT. What do you think about like third wave CBT, your DBT and ACT?
DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, don't have a great deal of experience in it, because I've dabbled in it a little bit here and there, and I'll pick and choose different things here and there that may work, like with a particular client. Obviously, we've got to know our clients and what's going to work well with them. I guess that's called more of eclectic, right? And kind of incorporating whatever the client needs. But I feel like it's overwhelming for a lot of people. With my clients in particular, if you follow a strict DBT kind of modality, I feel like there's so much going on there. It's not a bad thing, and I'm not criticizing it in any capacity. It's just not really my vibe, but I will pick things away from it, or out of it, if you will, that may be beneficial to a particular client. And what was the other one you asked? ACT?
ACT,
Yeah.
ACT, yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a pretty decent one, because if your thoughts are getting in the way of things, right, and it's stopping you from being motivated, it's stopping you from thinking clearly and things like that, I think ACT can help you get that motivation and find that awareness that you need, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I'm wondering if you could tell me a little bit about the pushback you've gotten for being a CBT person, because it feels like you're kind of getting hit on multiple sides. There's like your psychodynamic people that say CBT is shallow, and then there's like your social justice people who say CBT is gaslighting the client because you're not respecting their truth. So what kind of pushback have you gotten?
I don't care. And I respect your question, Ryan. But people can push back all they want. I'm gonna learn my client, right? That's I'm gonna build that rapport. I'm gonna build that trust with my client. We're gonna get down to the bottom of exactly what's going on, what brought you to therapy, right? And if they're struggling with anxiety or depression in particular, right, which is predominantly my clientele, right, it starts up here. You can't argue that, right? In my opinion, you can't argue that. You're having ants, automatic negative thoughts, right? You're having irrational thinking. One thing that I teach my clients is that when I'm teaching like cognitive distortions, we learn about the cognitive in day 2 of therapy with my clients. I do a lot of psychoeducation within the first couple of weeks of therapy with me. The first session or the second session, after the intake, I teach them the cognitive model, what that means, what that looks like. How do we retrain our brain to think, feel, and behave differently, right? And we have to do that. And I teach a little bit about the brain and the neural pathways and redirecting and using coping skills and all that. And I'm not going to go into my whole spiel. We'd be here all day. But then I go into like the third session is really teaching about cognitive distortions. And as we know what cognitive distortions are, they're irrational thoughts, right? The word irrational. I teach my clients that there's a synonym for irrational, and that is the word lie. Okay, because you cannot justify something that is a lie. You cannot justify something that is not truth, right? And so when it comes to anxiety, we always have to present the facts, right? And we can't present facts to something that's a lie. Right? You see the logic there?
Yeah.
And so I always tell them if you're having irrational thinking, what is your brain doing? It's lying to you. So we have to redirect or counter those irrational thoughts, and kind of use those things. Now, if a client, you said something about you're not meeting the client in their truth. Listen, our feelings are always our truth. I feel sad. I feel angry. I feel anxious. That is true. Your general feeling is always your truth. But it's important to understand this. Your feelings may not be the truth. Does that make sense, right? So, our feelings are always our truth, but our feelings may not be the truth. So we have to dissect this thought, this thinking, right? What are you thinking? I'm thinking that I'm a three-eyed alien from Mars. Okay, well, let's talk about why you think that. I feel weird. I feel sad because I'm a three-eyed person from Mars, right? Okay, well, you feel sad. That's true. But your sadness is in relation to thinking you're something that's not. We've got to dissect that.
So I think an example that I would use is like, I feel sad. Okay, it's a true statement. I'm the expert on how I'm feeling. I feel sad because you hate me. Okay, now
Right.
I'm trying to mind read you and like declare that to be true when I don't know that's true.
Where's the evidence that you have to back that up?
Yeah.
Right? So I feel sad because everybody at my job hates me. Okay, did everybody at your job tell you they hated you? Well, no. That's irrational thinking.
There's a therapist who comes out on Fridays to do a CBT group with our guys at the rehab center where I work.
Yeah.
And he gave a saying that I really liked about automatic negative thoughts. He goes, if those automatic negative thoughts come up, swipe left on that. I love that.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Swiping. Yeah, but that's the main point is we've got to get the thinking under control, and that's going to lead to feeling and behaving better, right?
I feel I can understand where some people are coming from, where they see you need to add something onto CBT, like you need to add more depth. But I don't see, like, to me, the CBT seems like it's such an obvious foundation for therapy and just mental health in general. Like, at what point would it be a bad thing if you challenged an inaccurate thought? If you've got an inaccurate thought that's leading to like suffering or leading to a behavior that leads to suffering, like, why would you not challenge that? But it seems like just too obvious to me.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And it doesn't make sense, does it?
No.
It's almost like logic. Can you, it's so hard. But as a clinician, it's our job to understand that lack of logic, if that's the right word there. I mean, because when you're so stuck in these loops of irrational thinking, right? When you're training your brain gets so used, I call them roads, right? Because, a lot of clients don't understand science talk, but the neural pathways in our brain, if you will, right? So these roads, our brain gets used to driving down these roads. It's like creating a habit. That's what our brain has been trained to do. I'm going to go down this anxiety road. Okay. Yeah, we can talk about the limbic system and the vagus nerves, and we can talk about the amygdala all day long. Yes, that's all relevant. However, when we get stuck in this constant driving down this road, this is the way I think, right? Your brain is so just engulfed in this is who I am. I'm so used to living this way. I'm so used to thinking this way, right? To the point to where it gets to the point to where hopefully that I can't take it anymore, and that's when they end up coming to see us, right? Like, but the thing is that, by challenging the thoughts, challenging what's going on, challenging not the feeling necessarily, but definitely the behaviors, it's, we can get to a logical point of, okay, I see where I need to redirect, which means go down a different road, use the neuroplasticity in our brain to create these new roads, if you will, so that we can start thinking and feeling and behaving better.
Yeah, I like that. So we recently went to this conference, Association for Mental Health Professionals, and it was a lot of therapists who are heterodox
Mm-hmm.
and think differently about the mental health field. How do you observe the mental health field? What do you think might be off about it?
That's a loaded question, Ryan. We got how much time? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, logic, reality. I mean, I think there's way too much affirming of lies, right? And I think that, in my opinion, uh, affirming something that's not real, affirming mental illness. Why are we honoring? Why are we celebrating somebody with a mental illness? Why are we normalizing? Ugh, hate that word, right? Why are we normalizing mental illness? Right? I think that's crazy to me. Like, there's no logic there. And we want people thinking logically. We want people to be living in a reality based world and mindset. I think that's so important. And I think that's the biggest problem, affirming ridiculous things that aren't reality based, affirming things that are condoning your mental illness. Oh, it's okay to be mentally ill. I'm going to coddle and pet you a little bit. And we'll talk about rainbows and butterflies if that makes you feel better. That's I don't agree with that at all.
Hmm. So one of the things we talk a lot about in our circles is the political bias in our field, and how conservative therapists are treated. And often you see so many of the dominant narrative is that conservatives should not be therapists because you don't have the right values. How do you respond to that?
I mean, think what you want, right? I mean, if you think that conservatives shouldn't be therapists, okay, you're allowed to think that. It's, but I think conservative therapists are the real therapists. That's my opinion. And I may get canceled for saying that, and that's okay. But I think conservative therapists are thinking logically, right? We're reality-based, evidence-based therapists, where we look at the facts. And then also, a lot of conservative therapists are also Christian therapists, right? I happen to be a Christian therapist as well. I incorporate Christianity at the request of a client. They know it's in my socials and all those kinds of things that I'm a conservative Christian therapist. But I don't force it in a therapy session unless it's requested, which I do often get, and I'm happy to oblige. But I think, as a conservative therapist, those that say that we don't have the proper values, to me is ridiculous, because in my mind, we're the ones that have the proper values. And that may be bias, I don't know, but that's just how I truly feel about it.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I definitely respect your courage and like speaking out and everything, but I also see this as a pretty like ominous like thing we're against. Like it's really like a David versus Goliath kind of battle, because all the major organizations, the APA, ACA, National Association of Social Work, they're all like super far left wing and very intolerant of any kind of heterodox thinking. Anything that doesn't toe the line, they're against. And like, how do you see that, like being in such a small? Is it SOAD that says there's 6% of therapists are conservative?
Right.
Like, how do you see yourself in that kind of that battle when there's such a huge disparity in power?
I keep pushing. I'm going to stand in my truth always, and, like I think, like I've said before, it's our responsibility to keep being loud, keep pushing forward, keep focusing on reality-based therapy, and keep focusing on evidence-based therapy, and keep pushing our narrative. All these other associations that are so, left-leaning, I don't have control over them per se, but I have control over me, and I have control over how I choose to practice and the type of clinician that I choose to be. And I'm not going to be afraid. I'm not going to be afraid anymore, because, like Soad has mentioned before, they can't come after my license. Right? They can't do any of that, right? So what do I have to be afraid of? So I think I'm not going to be afraid of pushback anymore, because that's my responsibility as a conservative therapist. I feel like that is my responsibility to push back as I get the pushback, if that makes sense. I'm not going to be quiet, and I'm going to continue to practice the way I've been. I have a relatively successful practice. I'm actually fully booked at this point. I'm not taking any new clients right now, but I think that speaks volumes. A lot of my clients come from word of mouth. A client tells a friend, tells a sister, tells a brother, kind of thing. And also through my socials and stuff like that. But I think I'm just going to keep going, and I'm not going to let anybody bully me anymore. I'm just not. It's my responsibility not to.
I love that. I think what you're saying, I've heard other people say this too, where it's like, it looks like there's this insurmountable bully coming after you, but in some sense it's kind of a paper tiger, because when you actually speak out, the woke people in our field represent such a tiny sliver of the population.
Yeah.
And there's a huge untapped market that people like you are tapping into. Like, hey, I'm a sane therapist. Come see me.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. It's funny is that when they come after us, right? The woke tards, we'll call them. I'm loving that term, the woke tards.
I just talked to a Rebecca Smith. I think she's the origin of that term.
Oh, yes. Okay. That's right. I remember that. Yeah. Kudos to Rebecca. The woke tards, when they come after us, I think, the problem is like what you just said, when we kick back, guess what they do? They cower. Right? You see all the videos, you see all the stuff about, when we push back, when we bring the facts, right? They don't have anything else to say or do in that moment but to cower away. And that's where the name calling, the bullying, the violence, that's where all of that comes from, because they can no longer justify their irrationality. They can no longer justify the lies in their brain. So they have to go to another level and name call and belittle and bully and use violence and things like that.
What it reminds me of, I've used this analogy before, but I worked at a mental health center that was predominantly for younger men on the autism spectrum, and they love Dungeons and Dragons. And Dungeons and Dragons is a game of pretend, basically.
Right.
And the game only works if everybody agrees to play pretend, right? If someone's like, that's not real, like, the game doesn't really work. And it's the same way with wokeness. Like, it's a giant game of pretend that you're trying to force everybody to play.
Right.
if one person says that's a man in a dress, like it collapses.
It's a man in a dress. That is a truthful statement, right? But if they say I'm a woman in a dress, that's not,
Hmm.
right? And you cannot, no matter what you do, no matter what you say, there's nothing you can do or say to convince me that a biological male wearing a dress is a woman. It's irrational. It's a lie. And there's going to be some type of underlying situation going on there, and it is the job of clinicians, practitioners, doctors, parents, all of us. It is our job to figure out what it is, what the other underlying issue there is that makes this person have gender dysphoria, and why they think that they're a woman because they're in a dress.
Yeah, I think something you just said there is a big reason why CBT is so unpopular amongst the social justice crowd is
Mm-hmm.
because, if you introduce logic and rationality and the need for evidence, like their narrative collapses instantly. So you have to
Exactly.
keep those things off the table. So
Exactly.
that would rule out CBT.
Exactly. You nailed it. Nailed it. That's why I love it so much. Because guess what? I'm going to be right. Not that matters, but you see my point, right? The
Yeah.
rationality, it's rational, it's logic, it's factual.
I feel like we need some kind of social CBT, like society-wide CBT. Like, okay, you're gonna die because Bad Orange Man is in the White House. Okay, like what? Let's check the facts here. Like, what did Bad Orange Man do to you recently?
Oh, let's pet, let's coddle. Exactly, right? I mean, if they would just sit down and look at the great things that Bad Orange Man has actually done in the 9 months now? Has it been 9 months?
Yeah.
That he's been in office, and I mean, gosh, the peace treaties and everything that he's done that no other president has been able to do. That's when I'm like, I don't understand. I don't understand their logic. Like, how could you not go, okay, I see 4 beans on the table. 1, 2, 3, 4. But a woke person is going to go, oh, those were Trump's beans, so I'm going to say there's only 3. When clearly they can see that there's 4 beans on the table. So make that make sense.
I think part of the ideology, and I think this dates back to like critical theory as well, and that is part of the ideology is like the political mission that we're trying to accomplish is most important. It's more important than reality. Therefore, it's okay to lie for the cause.
Mm. Again, make that make sense. Yeah. I mean, okay, we're going to lie and we're going to make ourselves look stupid on purpose. And I don't like using the word stupid. I think that's a horrible word. But if you've got 4 beans sitting in front of you, and just because you don't like the person who put them there, you're gonna make it a lie, just for the sake of making it a lie, it makes you look bad. I mean, does that make sense,
Oh
right? I
yeah.
mean, yeah, it's like, I don't understand why they would purposefully do that to themselves. I mean, there's no self-respect, no self-worth, no self-compassion, no dignity. I mean, I'm just going to look like a freakazoid just because I don't like Orange Man,
Hmm.
and make me look bad. I don't get the logic.
So I want to get into, if it's okay with you, get
Sure.
into the story about your daughter.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Okay, so I have a 28-year-old daughter, who was, and I also have a 26-year-old son, and both have very, very interesting stories. And a lot of people think I went into mental health because of my son. My son attempted suicide 17 times. Yes. But he was not the one. I kind of told you my story about going into the field, but all of my son's struggles with mental health came later. But I want to specifically kind of talk about my daughter to begin with, because My daughter was, I say was, and the reason why I'm saying was is because she's no longer in our lives. She is still alive that I know of, God willing, but she has taken herself out of our lives because um, she was once she was our star pupil child. She was in honors all throughout high school. She was fluent in honors French. She was an athlete. She played volleyball, softball, basketball. She did all the milestones, right? She turned 16, we got her car, right? She turned 16, she got her first job and saved money, right? All the things. She graduated high school, and we were so proud of her. She got into the University of North Texas. Her dream was she wanted to get her PhD in chemistry. She wanted to be a chemist. Loved that. My daughter was very smart and graduated high school with honors, everything. Like I said, she was our star pupil. She was our star little munchkin. Anyway, she graduated high school and went off to college, and she went to University of North Texas. UNT, as I'm starting to realize over the years, is very more liberal. And my daughter went off to college at UNT, and I guess she kind of found this newfound freedom, maybe, I don't know, because she knew better, and she was very smart, but she got in with a bad crowd at college, and she started experimenting with drugs, and ended up failing out her first semester, on my dime, by the way. And we sat her down. She begged us for another chance, one more chance to go back to school. And we believed in her. We had a immense amount of faith in her because we knew how smart she was. We knew how capable she was. She had goals, she had dreams, she had aspirations she wanted to invent or create a pill that would cure cancer. That's what she told me. I want to cure cancer with a pill. I'm like, well, Boo, her nickname was Boo. I said, Boo, if that's what you want to do, go out and do it. Only you can get in your way. You can go do that. And so that's why she wanted to be a chemist. But she went back. We agreed to put her back in college for that second semester. And she, I think maybe 2 weeks into the semester, went in, and she just started screwing up and hanging out with the wrong crowd again and doing all the stupid things. And I'm going to try to make this short, but she ended up getting out of college, didn't complete college, started hanging out with the wrong people. She ended up moving to in her own apartment, got a roommate, still living her crazy lifestyle. One thing that I want to share is that she came out to us as bisexual at 11 years old. 11. But my husband and I were like, I'm not going to argue with an 11-year-old. They don't have the logic yet, right? They don't really understand, all the things. So I said, you know what? Okay, your dad and I love you no matter what. And that was the extent of the conversation. And that was truthful, Anyway, so I had to go back to that to kind of get to where I'm going. So she went on, and she was living her life, and she was living her lifestyle, whatever. And but she always maintained a job. She was paying her bills. And so she got with this guy that she was dating, and they ended up moving to Colorado. And and as you and I both know, Colorado is definitely a left-leaning state, very blue for the most part. And they moved up there, and she started working in like dispensaries and things like that, because I guess marijuana is legal in Colorado. And they were paying their bills. She'd never called and asked us for money or anything. And I'm trying to get to the main important parts here. But and long story shorter, they were told that they could make like a buttload of money at this farm, this marijuana farm in Oklahoma. So they were convinced to leave their jobs, leave their life, everything that they had built in Colorado, and truck on down to Oklahoma to live and work on this pot farm. All rainbows and butterflies. And it turned out to be quite the opposite. And my daughter and her boyfriend at the time were basically living in a cement box in a garage, and they had no windows or anything, and they would just go out and work in these fields. They weren't getting the money that was promised to them. It turned out to be a shamble. Micah's mental health was getting crazy bad, and so she was calling me, and she's like, I need, I'm not doing well, blah blah blah. The day after Christmas, or the Christmas day, of, I think it was 2019, my son and her actually had a phone conversation, and I think my son convinced her to come home, which I'm grateful for. So on the day after Christmas, December 26th, my son and I drove down to Oklahoma, picked up my daughter, and brought her home. And we, got her into therapy, got her the help she needs, did all this stuff, and she was doing better. She was doing a lot better. And but then, and I'm getting to the juicy parts, she met this person. I'm assuming online somewhere. And we started noticing Micah's behavior. She started coming in at all hours of the night, morning, like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. Lots of behavioral changes here, which I'm going to notice as a behaviorist. But lots of behavioral changes going on, and I'm like, okay, what's going on? Anyway, she asked one night if one of her girlfriends could spend the night. Not a girl who was a friend. And Micah was in like her 20s at this point, right? She's not a teenager anymore. She's in her 20s, but she still always knew the rules of the house. If you're the opposite sex, you don't go into the bedrooms and you don't spend the night, right? But she asked if one of her girlfriends could spend the night, and Rick and I were like, yeah, sure, no problem. Well, we have cameras in our home because we have a lot, and I probably shouldn't be putting this on the internet, but we have a lot of, my husband's a professional musician, so we have cameras for security purposes because we have an in-house studio in our home. He's a professional drummer. And so these cameras, normally we keep the indoor ones off because we're home. We don't need them on. But we had gone out of town, and I think Rick had forgot to turn them off. Okay. And this person spent the night, and Rick got an alert on the camera because there's motion, and so he got an alert, and he's like, oh crap, I forgot to turn the cameras off. So he went in and looked at it and heard this person talking, and it was a man. It was a trans woman. And so Micah started hanging out with this person, and they started getting romantically involved. And we had a falling out because of this person's, in the way that they were disrespecting my husband. He and my husband got into a mild, not a physical altercation, but a verbal altercation on our property because my husband used the word ghetto because he was a black man. And he took offense to the word ghetto. And so they had a little altercation. It pissed off my daughter. They left. I didn't see that was in 2019. That was the last time I saw her. And so they left our lives, and I think about 3 years went by, and then we started talking again randomly. They ended up moving. She and him moved back to Colorado, so she's back in Colorado, and she and him moved there, and Mike and I started talking again. I can't remember the details with that, but slowly but surely we were starting to build our relationship. And a huge boundary that we set into place was we do not discuss religion or politics. Because Micah is very, very, my daughter's a woke tard. I don't know what else to say. She's very much a woke-tard. She's very liberal, radical left, and because she's with a transgender. And then my daughter tried to say that she's also transgender, which
Micah?
my daughter, Micah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's her name. And now she's all of a sudden transgender. Like she drank the Kool-Aid and now she caught it, you know. And her partner's also allegedly has DID. And from what I understand, it's not treated. So we've got my daughter with a trans person who also has DID. And so now my daughter's claiming to be a trans person with DID. And it's like, you can't catch it. You know what I mean? But then we were building our relationship. We set a very clear boundary in place. We do not talk politics and we do not talk religion for the sake of saving our relationship with our daughter. But then the election came. And
Was that 2024?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, Trump's, you know, the election came, and the day after the election, you know, Trump won all the things. The day after election, my daughter texts me and she says, "Who'd you vote for?" And I immediately responded with, "Micah, we have agreed to not discuss religion and politics. That was a boundary we put in place." And she says, "Well, that tells me all I need to know." She says, "Now you will consider me dead because you voted for a man that wants me and my partner dead. So I'm going to consider you and dad dead, and you will now consider me dead because you voted for somebody who wants the trans people, the LGBTQ plus IA people dead." And she blocked me. And so I haven't talked to her since the day after the election, since Trump, you know, won the election. But I haven't actually seen her in person since 2019. And the thing is that that's what, you know, I am the first person who will support somebody for getting rid of toxicity in their life. If you're in a toxic relationship, get out of the toxic relationship. If you're in a toxic work environment, you got to get out of the toxic work environment. You have to prioritize your mental health and your wellness over all things, right? And you know, I'll be the first person to say, if if this person is toxic to you and blah 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 blah, you know, you need to reevaluate and get out of that toxic environment. But in this situation, you know, yeah, we weren't always the perfect family. What family is? There was definitely ups and downs in my children's lives as they grew up, you know, arguments, yelling. We weren't perfect. But Micah, you know, is she's just claiming all these things, and trauma, and we're bad and we're evil and we're bigots. She's called me and my husband every single one of the names you can think of: bigots, transphobes, hypocrites, fascists, you know, all the things. My husband and I have been called that by our own daughter. And this is the problem with the left, is especially the radical left, is that if they could just understand that just because of a specific ideology doesn't mean that we can't still get along. It doesn't mean that we can't still love each other and be a family. We can set clear boundaries, but it takes two for everybody to honor and respect those boundaries. And because of her ideology and the lies that she's believing about President Trump and wanting these people dead and in concentration camps, and you know, what is the newest thing that they're saying now? You know, like that therapy where they shock you, whatever it's
Oh,
called.
like aversion therapy, or
Yeah, whatever.
yeah.
Yeah, now that's the big rage. You know, and it's just like, you know, they're being lied to and they're believing it, and it's creating so much division amongst you know, family. I miss my daughter so much. I pray for her every day, and the only thing that I can do at this point is give her to God. That's the only thing that I can do, right? I can give her to God, and I can I can pray that one day before I die, that I will get to be with my daughter again, and that, her heart and her mind will be healed in some capacity, and she'll return home. That is my hope in prayer. But I can only give it to God, and that's all I can do with my daughter.
So, if you couldn't tell, I'm very concerned with the psychology of wokeness. So, I'm very interested in this story. And there's a few things to unpack. And one is a lot of this seems to start going off to college, living away from home. A lot of people join cults when they first go off to college or leave home,
Yeah.
including wokeness. Another is drug use. I know marijuana has the potential to cause psychosis. And to
Yes.
me, some of this behavior, whether it's like clinically diagnosed as psychosis or not, like disowning your family is not normal, healthy behavior. And
Right.
it's hard for me to like say that the cannabis use had no effect on that, you
Oh,
know?
yeah.
Um, and then, some of I feel like you could CBT some of this stuff, like because you voted for Trump, therefore you want me dead. Like that's
Mhm.
mind reading. There's so much that goes into that. But within that kind of spun out logic of social justice, all that made sense to her.
Yeah. Which is irrational.
Mm.
Right? It's irrational. And I 1,000,000% agree with you with all her drug use and everything like that. 1,000,000%. It definitely played a part. No doubt about it. Because I mean, God, if I could, if you could have seen her or met her throughout her, like, young adolescent and, teenage years, like in high school and stuff like that, literally day and night. Even with her own appearance, my daughter was gorgeous.
Mm.
I'm not biased in that either. People would say it all the time, how beautiful she was. Now she looks pretty much, from what I've seen, she kind of looks like what you see in all the videos with the left. The piercings everywhere, the
Mm.
colored hair, the shaved head. I mean, um, you know, listen, if piercings are your thing, do you? I prefer tattoos. I'm a tattooed therapist. I love tattoos. So I'm not going to put too much stereotype into those things because I'm not crazy and I have tattoos. Anyway, but yes, I 100% agree that her drug use. I mean, she did other things besides marijuana. So I know that
Mm.
it definitely played a huge part in that.
I heard the expression the other day, visibly Democratic voting person, meaning like colored hair and like
Oh,
yeah. It's like I can tell from 50 feet away you voted for,
yeah,
Harris.
yeah, for sure. And
Mm.
I have mixed feelings about that, because it's like, okay, does the pattern fit? If we're going to look at patterns, speaking of psychology, right? If we're going to look at patterns, I would 100% agree with that. The pattern fits. The green hair, the septum piercings, all the shaved heads, the colored hair, and everything like that. 100%. But having been, a victim of judgment based on my tattoos, I struggle with putting people in stereotype boxes.
Mm.
Like, just because you have green hair, you're a left, radical left woke tard, right? Or just because you have a septum piercing, you're,
Do
whatever.
you feel like the tattoo thing is getting better? Because I know, like, even at my church, a ton of people have tattoos.
100% yes. But there's still so many people that are, wrapped up in the professional world of, just professionals in general. Like, it doesn't matter whether you're a therapist, a doctor, a lawyer, whatever. There's so much bias with, the person that I was working with, a client's mom, and she was very Christian, like very, very Christian. And not that that's a bad thing, obviously, but she also knew I was a Christian, and she was raised very strict that, only gang members and violent people and murderers had tattoos, right? And she saw my tattoo one day on this arm, which is a cross, and it's like, oh my God, you have tattoos? And I was like, oh yeah. And she's like, but I thought you were Christian. And so I loved this conversation with her because it was educational, and I really got to teach her something that, okay, you're putting people in a box that, you know, they don't, you can't judge a book by its cover, people. You
Do you
cannot
know
judge
that?
books
Do you know that Jesus is tatted?
that Jesus has tatted.
In the book of Revelation, it says there's a marking on his thigh that says King of Kings and Lord of Lords.
Really?
Yeah.
I need to go read Revelations again. I think I missed that part. Uh-oh, here comes my dog. She's starting to bark again.
So I've loved this conversation. I got 2 questions left for you, but first you said you'd taken some notes, and I was wondering if there's anything you wanted to touch on that we haven't touched on yet.
You know, I think all my notes were pretty much everything we've already talked about. But I think, you know, for the sake of time, let's go ahead and go to your 2 questions, because I'll get rattling on again and we'll be here another hour.
So my first question should be a softball for you, and that is, how do we fix the therapy profession?
Start over. I'm going to repeat what everybody else has been saying. I think we need to start over. I think the educational system needs to take a freaking a reality check, you know, because these young clinicians that are in school, Ryan, I'm so excited for you to finally be graduating in December. You're almost there, buddy. My broski, you're almost there. But, you know, I think, you know, it starts there. I think it starts there, because these young, you know, future therapists are, you know, getting brainwashed and getting lied to, starting in their own educational system. You know, I think it needs to start there. And then from there, we need to look at, you know, luckily for me, I'm in the LPC world. You know, I know the social work world is a shit show, pardon my
Yeah.
French, but I mean, you know, for the social workers out there, I'm praying for y'all. But in the LPC world, not quite as crazy, but still crazy. I think all these associations need to get in line, and they need to get checked, and they need to get reality based as clinicians and as professionals in the clinical field.
Hmm. I like that. I like that a lot. So my final question,
Mm-hmm.
when you look at society more broadly, what is one issue that we're not talking about enough that we should be talking about more?
Brian.
I give you all the easy ones.
Is that easy? I mean, okay, word it to me one more time.
When you look at society, what's one thing that we're not talking about enough that we should be talking about more? A big issue that needs more attention.
Mental health.
Hmm.
Reality-based mental health. Let's get more men involved. Let's see more men, you know, with like you, and that are reality-based, masculine, real masculinity, clinicians, factual based. I think, you know, having conversation that, you know, talking about mental health, talking about stress, talking about being overwhelmed, talking about anxiety and all these things, you know, it's okay. And it doesn't make you any lesser of a person or any lesser of a man. And, you know, I think if we can talk more about mental health and, you know, debunking stigma surrounding it, but also really having people vet their clinicians, and you know, making sure that they're focused on, you know, evidence-based, reality-based, factually based, you know, clinical practices, and just having a conversation. And I think, I mean, I guess next to mental health, I guess would be politics in a way, because I want us as a society, as Americans, okay, America first, always, right? And I think us as a society, as Americans, need to learn how to have conversations, adult conversations, without the bullying, the name calling, the belittling, and the violence, and be like, you know what? I still love you, dude. You may think differently than I do. You may see things a little differently than I do, But I still love you, and it's going to be okay. So learning how to have realistic, rational adult conversations, and kind of debunking the whole stigma surrounding mental health, and especially with men and mental health, I think.
I love that answer.
Thanks.
Well, Mickey, thank you so much for joining me. I've loved our conversation. I would love to talk to you again anytime.
You know my number, friend. Thank you so much for having me here, letting me share a little bit about who I am and my story. It's been an absolute joy and honor, Ryan. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.